Good morning, Bitcoins, and welcome to MadBitcoins Live. Our guest tonight is Vinny Lingham, the co-founder of Gyft, a shark on Shark Tank, and the CEO of Civic, a new startup dedicated to protecting your identity and solving the problem of identity fraud. Vinny Lingham, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great, thank you.
All right, could you just give us a little bit of your background and maybe a short version of what you think about the Bitcoin scaling drama?
Sure. Background, serial entrepreneur from South Africa originally. I now live in good old San Francisco Bay Area. Got involved in Bitcoin with my last company, Gyft, which is a gift card platform, allows people to buy gift cards using Bitcoin. I'm sure most of the Bitcoiners in the US at least have heard of it or use it. Sold that to First Data Corporation in 2014 and started Civic early last year. And Civic's basically identity theft protection, and we're building identity tools and technologies on the back of the blockchain going forward. So very much a key interest still in being in the Bitcoin blockchain space. My thoughts around, the scaling debate. I think it's good that we've gotten to the point where it's so heated that we have to solve it, because otherwise, if it hadn't gotten to this point, it's just going to keep forever and ever. And I think we're at a point now where we're either going to unite around one way forward, or we're going to split and divide. I personally think that's the worst possible option. So I think it's forcing people to be creative and think about how do we come together as a community and not fracture. And I think if we can do that, we'll be so much better for it.
And that's definitely the goal of this video series. It's to understand the problem and understand how we can come together and attempt to solve the problem. And I'd just like to thank our 50 or so live viewers. If everyone could give us a thumbs up and a share and help other people find out about this content, that would be great. And now we're going to go back to the screen share. And I just wanted to show you this. This is a very basic chart that I put together of an attempt to understand the problem of Bitcoin here. And I call this the Bitcoin triangle. And on the top there, we have users. On the lower left, we have coders. And then we have miners. And the problem here is that these three disparate groups all need to agree. Would you agree that this is a good starting off point for the Bitcoin debate?
Well, I don't think it's simple as that. I think all three don't always have to agree for something to happen. For example, miners, and for example, nodes aren't in that triangle right now. So there's node's an important part of this. For example, you've got the threat of a user-activated soft fork, which could basically nullify the need for miners to have consensus on a go-forward basis. So these are the problems we have. It's actually a lot more complex than people realize.
So even more complex than that chart.
I would say it's an oversimplification of the issues, but it's a start.
It's a start, because the way I'm seeing it, basically we have Jihan Wu and Bitmain. They're representing the miners, maybe going off on their own with Roger Ver to start Bitcoin Unlimited. Then you have the coders with Bitcoin Core, maybe not the best communicators, maybe somehow didn't get the answer through to Roger and Jihan, and now we have this unfortunate potential split. Do you think we're going to split? Is Bitcoin going to fork?
I think that the chances of us forking are real, and I think for us to ignore them, it's a risk equation, really. There's a percentage chance of a fork happening, and in my mind, that percentage chance is, when I wrote the blog post, A Fork in the Road, when I published it, a lot of people said the chance of a fork is 0, 5%, 10%, very skeptical. And that was the problem. Everyone is just very skeptical about the real risk of a hard fork coming our way. Since publishing that post, and people kind of waking up to the reality and getting more activism going in the Bitcoin community around realizing this fork is actually a bad thing for us, and Segwit's not being activated, and we've got lots of issues around that. I think the community's woken up, and that's good, because now the dialogue's going. I'm seeing more and more posts about it, more people active. It was just kind of like ETF all day long, and that's like, people in Bitcoin are so fixated on the price of Bitcoin and making money out of it, they forget that the system has to endure a lot of ups and downs, and it needs to actually add value to the world to become valuable in the long term. The short-term pricing, and it's almost irrelevant to an extent. because if Bitcoin's successful, it's worth $50,000, $100,000, whatever the number is. Throw out a big number, that's what it's worth if it's successful. But if we focus on the short-term price gyrations up and down and what it's worth, we're not going to get there. We need to be like more mission-driven as an ecosystem and as a environment. We need to think about the mission of Bitcoin a lot more than the price of Bitcoin. And I often feel that that's where the focus has been. Now, to be fair, the price of Bitcoin is a reflection of demand. It's a reflection of utility as well, what we can do with it, how we can move money around, etc. And so that's an important part of it. But if we lose sight of the bigger picture of how this can be a positive change in the world, how it can, force, and just look at governments, just force governments to have to reconsider before they print more money, before they raise interest rates. What is our local currency price versus the Bitcoin going to look like afterwards? 20-year sort of time horizon. But that's a real thing in the world where people won't have money stolen from them. Inflation won't be possible because governments will be concerned about the impact of their currency against the Bitcoin. Now that's kind of a mission for me, maybe, and maybe a few others, and everyone's got their own mission with Bitcoin. But I think ultimately, as an ecosystem and as a community, we've got to pull together and think about the mission of Bitcoin as opposed to the price.
It's an excellent point. The ETF was all the focus, and it was only a monetary issue that would adjust the value of the Bitcoin.
Exactly. And I published my post, preventing another Bitcoin bubble. I really spoke about what my concerns with an ETF going live. It's first of all introducing a lot more volatility, a lot of call it weak hands into Bitcoin, a lot of speculators. It's the wrong type of people right now because we're not there yet. Our infrastructure, our code base potentially be forked right now. We've got lots of issues to deal with. It's not ready for prime time. And just to push it there, just because we can drive the hype and drive the price up, doesn't mean it deserves it. And I think we should get to the point where we just be a little more realistic about where Bitcoin is today. And I'll take responsibility. I mean, I've been guilty of saying that Bitcoin is worth a lot more than it has been. I've been one saying, hey, it's going to be worth 3,000 and more over the years, and 1,000 last year. But I've also been bearish in the past as well, and I've been bullish for. If you look at my post a year ago, like I think it's Bitcoin Awakens, I don't know the exact title, but it basically said that there's been a turning point, and a large part of that post was premised on the fact that we had consensus on scaling and Segwit. I wrote that post, and I think it was April, and in February, everyone got together. They had an accord. They agreed on scaling. So in my mind, scaling was dealt with, and then Segwit was being deployed late last year, and it would be activated. And so that was the assumption I was going on. Like, hey, if the scaling debate was resolved, Bitcoin's going to go to the roof. I think we all agree that. But now we're realizing, well, hold on, the scaling debate's not resolved, and it could be in stasis for a lot longer. So that forces me to sit back and say something's wrong. We've got to fix this before we can focus on the price. The price is important, but it's important only insofar as Bitcoin survives as a unified fork. We do not want the divisiveness we see today. I mean, I've tried to stay, and I am staying out of the personal fighting. I mean, I know Roger. I don't think he's a bad guy. People hate him, and he's the Bitcoin Judas, and now whatever. Like, Roger's actually not a bad guy. He means well. He actually has Bitcoin. He has the best intention of Bitcoin. The difference in Roger, I think, and he's reacting to a lot of frustration. And so what you see in his actions is a guy who's frustrated with the way things are right now. And maybe he has a different vision for Bitcoin. Maybe he sees Bitcoin as electronic money. And I personally see Bitcoin as a store of value, a replacement for gold, a digital gold. And so the problem is the current platform that Bitcoin's built on doesn't really support both right now concurrently. My view is we get to electronic money when it's a store of value, and his view is he wants to buy coffee right now, and my view on that was go get a Starbucks card from Gyft. So this is the thing. We all agree that we're trying to further Bitcoin. We just all have a different way of showing it. The point is, where BU's gotten to right now and the miners have gotten to right now, this is divisive. We should be unifying, not splitting ourselves up. If we can't agree on the issues, we need to come together and figure out why not and resolve them. This is split. A hard fork is not the solution. A contentious hard fork is not the solution. The only hard fork I think which is the solution is a 90% plus hard fork. I say 95 is really my threshold, where everyone is broad consensus in the Bitcoin community that this is the way we want to go, and we go in that direction. 80% is not good enough. 75% is not good enough, because you're going to have the Ether, classic Ether split. And that's where I stand. So everything I say is about preventing a hard fork, because I just think that people don't understand the network effect that Bitcoin has, the support, broad-based support it has as a unified cryptocurrency, and splitting it up and having Bitcoin Unlimited on Bitcoin.com and having Bitcoin on Bitcoin.org. I mean, this is crazy, guys. Like, I'm a consumer internet guy. This is not the way we want to go about doing it. So I'd rather be in a situation where we just say, guys, lay down your weapons and let's get around and figure this out. But let's not, all that happens is we're going from one side to another. Okay, we're going to activate user activated soft fork. Fine. We're going to go in and attack the money chain. We're going to fork off. We're going to do this. It's just escalating. People are throwing out, we're going to change proof of work. This is not how you solve problems. Okay, this is not how you solve these types of problems. We need to come together and figure it out. And that's what I'm focusing on right now in the backgrounds, in conversations I'm having. And I also believe that the market forces, if we don't resolve this as a community, the market's going to resolve it for us. Okay, the price will come down to a point where we're forced to have to figure this out. And, I hope it doesn't get to that point. I hope it doesn't get to the point where Bitcoin's crashing to $200 a coin, because that means we're really about to fail, because the market's pricing in a high degree of failure. Right now, the market's pricing in a small chance of failure, a lot more than it was pricing in, at the ETF. And that's my point.
I could definitely see it going on both sides there. If anything, you're guilty of being too good a predictor. Your predictions in the past were almost spot on and perfect. We went through a downturn. You completely predicted it. So people are definitely looking for you for that. But I think a similar point to this, as far as if Bitcoin is ready to scale and ready to have all these transactions, like you said, it's not ready. A few years ago, WikiLeaks found Bitcoin and they were going to adopt it. And Satoshi said, as much as we'd like that publicity, we're just not ready. The network's not big enough. There's not enough miners, such and such. So WikiLeaks laid out, came back a few years later, and got their funding from Bitcoin. And I agree with you. Segwit looked good. It looked like it was a good technical solution. They had the Hong Kong agreement. They had a couple of other agreements, the scaling conferences. From afar, I watched the video live streams like everybody else that didn't attend, and it looked good. It looked like we were on task. I saw the appropriate groups getting together and meeting. It seemed like we were on the same page, but then suddenly it splintered apart recently, especially with Antminer and Bitmain joining Roger, them getting 30% of the hashing power. That's really woken people up to the potential problem. But first, I wanted to go over a quote from your most recent article, The Power of the Invisible Hand. And what you said here, you said, the rising price of Bitcoin in the past 18 months has actually been its downfall. The higher the price, the higher the mining fees, and the more the miners want more transactions per block. And this effectively reinforces an unwillingness to look at options such as Segwit. Are the miner incentives misaligned? Do the miners have no reason to do what's good for them in the long term?
Look, I think it's a very complex situation. And my point on that argument, on that article is this. When the agreement was made to adopt Segwit, and forget all the conditions and hard forking and this whatever else, the Bitcoin price was $400. Okay, pre-halving. So that means the rewards per block was $10,000. Bitcoin price has gone up more than, so now it's sitting at $1,000. So it's got so the price, the rewards basically per block, the revenue per block, I think is like $15,000 roughly right now, close to $15,000 per block. So there's not really an incentive right now to actually solve the deadlock. Okay, and when I say that is everyone's making enough money on the mining side that if they don't get what they want, it's okay. And it kind of works both ways because the price is rising. So on the other side, it's on the core side, it's like, well, the network's secure and we're doing our jobs and we're making sure that there's demand for Bitcoin. So you could argue both sides. How do you break the deadlock? So the one argument I've got is that if we don't solve it, then the market's going to do it for us because faith will be lost. And so there is a price point. I mean, I think everyone can agree today, if Bitcoin dropped to $200 right now per Bitcoin, that most of the miner, are you still there? Okay, there we go. Sorry.
I still have the graphic.
I went black for a second. So if it drops to, I think 377 was the number that Chris from Arc Research put out, and if it drops to below a certain point where miners are actually losing and burning money, well, it forces a decision. So it might force that a hard fork and say, well, we're going to go our own way. It might force Segwit adoption. The point is that the market price has an influence on the incentive. So the question I have to ask from a behavioral economics perspective is, does a rising price perpetuate a gridlock and a deadlock and making a decision on both sides? And the answer I've got is yes, and Tone Bays slightly disagrees, but I say yes, it does. And does a falling price force people to come to the table and compromise, negotiate, get something done? And in my mind, yes, that does. Now, that's not the only way. So there are other options. I've been involved in a number of discussions. We are looking at every possible solution here. The only time I reject a solution is if it means a hard fork. Just hard fork, in my opinion, we're losing. I'm quitting Bitcoin world. I'm out. I'm going to go do something else. We'll move Civic onto a different platform, whatever it is. Right now, we've been built on Bitcoin. So we're very much, and yeah, if there's a hard fork, sure, we can move to the other fork. We can choose a fork or stay with it. That's not the point. The point is, if we splinter the community, we are losing a massive amount of network effects and benefit that we have being one unified community. The miners add value. People misunderstand my intentions. The miners are very important because right now, the proof of work, the hash rate, the ASICs, the infrastructure that's built up has really led to a point where Bitcoin is super secure. No one is going to be. We can't even fork Bitcoin. It's really hard to go. You can't really double spend it. It's a secure crypto currency platform. It's the most secure in the world. But by splitting it up, we are bifurcating that, and that is bad. And so we should figure out how to get everybody a piece of what they want. And it's not about compromise. It's about, I call it knowledge asymmetry. Sometimes it's just a situation where people don't understand the other sides. And I've tried to take a very neutral view on both sides, and I think they both have got good arguments to an extent for what they're doing. Now, the problem is the hostilities becomes an issue. So who starts first, right? On the one side, you'll have, maybe core supporters saying we have to change proof of work. Yeah, that makes sense, theoretically, if you're going to be attacked or if you look at the centralization that's occurring in mining. But then that just creates the other side getting it back up. I mean, this is like basically two drunk people in a bar, right? Pointing at each other, and eventually someone's, you're going to get into a fist fight. And I'm trying to prevent the fist fight, guys. Let's just calm down and let's figure out how to solve the problem, because fighting it out and splitting is not the solution in my mind.
It also seems a lot like the prisoner's dilemma. We're both locked in a room. We don't know what the other guy will do. And are we willing to rat them out? Are we willing to destroy Bitcoin by changing proof of work, which would make it impossible for the miners? Or are the miners willing to fork Bitcoin and make their own version and get new developers? Very much a all or nothing game that they're playing.
And that's the wrong game. I mean, that's a very good look. Technically, it's a good argument to say BU code sucks. Let them fork off. Let them fail. Ha ha. We'll prove them wrong. That's just not the right argument. I mean, that's
a nice, technical argument. People without emotions make that argument. They're not looking at the emotional. They're not looking at the marketing.
Exactly.
There's such a disaster and such a level of confusion where did I get Bitcoin 1 or Bitcoin 2? Mm-hmm. And we already have a confusion.
You're using an SPV wallet and everything's screwed. Who knows?
You have no idea. You don't even know which fork you're on. Yeah, unless the wallet's been recoded. Yeah.
Right.
I also saw an interesting article by Jimmy Song, who we've scheduled to come on the show tomorrow. And what Jimmy says is there's a possibility that Segwit won't be adopted and we won't fork. What do you think about that possibility? What would happen if we went down a middle road of everything stays the same?
I think that the possibility of that happening is the highest outcome for us right now. I think because of what's happened in the past 2 weeks, I think the chance of a fork has actually come down slightly. The chance of stasis, the status quo being for a bit longer, has gone up. But that introduces other risks to the system. I mean, we do have competitors building, technologies in the crypto world. I mean, Ether's having a run, lots of other alts taking a. So, how much of an issue is this going to be? Who knows? I mean, preserving Bitcoin as digital gold, I think, is still okay if we're in this sort of status quo mode for a while. But what's the long-term solution? We're losing time, and we need to be more conscious of the fact that as we're losing time as a community, it's tiring people out. It's wearing people down. Eventually, people just get fed up and leave. And And there's so much amazing talent in the Bitcoin ecosystem right now, even and working on some other shitcoin, and you just don't, right? So you want them to focus on Bitcoin. How do we do that? How do we prevent Bitcoin scaling debate fatigue, which is, by the way, hit a lot of people already. I mean, you know, we had obviously we had the Mike Hearn rage quit last year. We've had a whole bunch of people leave and try and do other things. I mean, I get it. It's tiring. Geez, I'm tired. Like some nights I'm getting sleep because I'm trying to figure this out and have calls all over the world. Yeah, I'm doing my bit. We all are. And so how do you prevent the fatigue and how do you prevent losing good people? I mean, Bitcoin is like a company, right? If you think about it, like the ecosystem is a company. Like you don't want your employees to walk out the door. You don't want your best employees to walk out the door. That's the worst thing you can have happen. You know, you've got star talent in the organization. You've got to keep them. You've got to keep them happy to an extent. These are real people. They're not robots, not machines. And so how do we get to the point where everyone just takes a step back and figures things out? And the reason I'm having this diplomatic approach is because I think there are solutions here. And some solutions haven't been made public yet, but there are solutions that people are working on. And there are people who share my view that we have to find something of an amicable resolution to the problem. It cannot be hostile. Okay, and very much, you know, I watched Gandhi as a kid. I really loved his whole sort of his passive resistance approach to things. I think it's a very interesting way of dealing with problems. And so it's peaceful resistance. And so how do we do that without, at the same time, taking a year to solve this problem? And so I think it's important that the debate's being had, but at the end of the day, everyone needs to take a step back, calm down. Like there's lots of FUD, there's lots of rumors on both sides. You know, one side, the Chinese government's taking over, the other side, you know, whatever, guys. Like you can throw all these things back and forth. It doesn't help. It inflames the situation more. And most of the time, if not all the time, most of these things aren't actually true. Okay, they're not. It's until we, you know, yeah, until we get to the point where we're actually focusing on the issues and trying to take the emotions out of the equation and everyone calming down just a bit. It's important to be active about it. It's important to be like, it's more important everyone understands the issues, okay? But the emotions, you know, like one of the things I've learned in life, and someone told me this, it's don't listen to how people say things, listen to what they say. And if you do that, you'll be a lot more successful in life because you'll gain a little bit more empathy for sometimes people, the emotions cloud the words that come out of their mouth, but what they're actually saying is actually, it makes sense. But because we're humans, you know, emotion is something which is taken the wrong way sometimes. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the hostilities are like. I'm saying, look, on both sides there's hostilities right now. I'm just saying you can't get to a resolution if it just escalates.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think that's what we've been trying to do this week on this show. Yesterday, we had a BU supporter and we had a Bitcoin Core supporter. And what I tried to get them to do instead of a debate is we worked on agreement. We worked on the points of Bitcoin that we agreed on. And if we got to a technical point that we disagreed on, that's 5, that's 10. We're going to put that aside and we're going to work on that later. And I think that's the attitude that we need to have. And it's so hard because we've become so fractured. I had Roger on the show Monday night, and a lot of people wanted me to be really critical of Roger and question him on all of his points, but I just kind of wanted to get his opinion out there. Then we can unpack it, then we can discuss it, and we can see how it goes. Now, on yesterday's show, we talked about Segwit, and Segwit's really kind of stuck at a 25-30% level, and it kind of reminds me of this House healthcare bill that we have going through the House. It's kind of dead on arrival. It wasn't sold right. It wasn't spun right. Something's gone wrong. The miners don't like it. Maybe they're afraid of the Lightning level 2 solutions. What can we do with Segwit? Can we maybe pull it back, re-explain it, launch it with a different name? What kind of scaling solutions can we really get through this network?
You know, I think that I think there's valid concerns from both sides and I think there's concern. I mean, if I represent the community for a second, there's definitely concern that the way Segwit was, you know, put into the market, it felt like it was being shoved down people's throats. Okay, and one of the things that Core prides themselves on, and I would ask them to think about this for a second. That Core prides themselves on the fact that they've set the consensus level at 95%. Okay. and they've asked for consensus. They've built Segwit for, and their approach to things like Segwit, and even a hard fork, for example, is that you need consensus. But the reality is,
it's laudable. 95% is true consensus. They're
yeah,
really going for
it.
We
agree. So they hold themselves to a very high level, and the core guys are really smart guys. Like, this is not, they hold themselves to a very high level, and they set the consensus level really high because they want to show the market and the community that they're not the ones in control. To a large extent, that is true. Then they're not in control of where Bitcoin goes for that perspective. Excuse me, but I think we can all agree now that we don't have consensus on Segwit. So there is a problem here. Okay, and I think Core just, I think that they kind of recognize it, but I don't think it's very clear every single developer within the Core. But I think the way that it was done would, means, and again, this is not about the miners. This is about getting the community as a whole to embrace something, and because it doesn't, it's actually a very binary argument. Because we don't have 95% consensus, we don't have consensus, and we're not even close to it. So then, what went wrong? Okay, why don't we have consensus? You can blame the miners to an extent, but it's not only the miners' fault. And you can argue, well, there's 80% consensus on the nodes, sure, but it's not 95% either. And and obviously you can have fake nodes and whatever else. It's, my point is, and again, it's not accusing Core, it's just that we need to really look at the way consensus is built, because it's not just built by delivery of code and technology. Consensus isn't just a number, a hash rate percentage of hash rate power or percentage of nodes. It's in the hearts and minds of the people in the community. It's, do people believe that this is the right way forward? And if they don't, how do we address those concerns? And how do we do it preemptively? So you don't get to the point where the code is written, deployed, and ready to be activated, and we don't have consensus. And so I would just ask that, like, all the logic in the world can't solve the human emotion. And how do we get to the point where we can build towards that?
I think this is exactly the right point to set. It comes back to a word that you said earlier, empathy. We need to have empathy for the other side. We need to understand their emotions. And right now I want to understand the Core team's emotion. They presented us with Segwit, this incredibly technological solution that in many ways solves the problem. But unfortunately, people didn't understand it. People didn't get attached to it. People didn't realize what problems it was solving. There's something muddled there. So I understand their frustration. Technologically, they're sound. But empathy-wise, with the explanation and the message, something's gotten lost. And that's the confusion that I think we're in, is a lack of empathy for the other side.
Yeah, and you can argue that, that Core did everything they could, arguably, to put information out, disseminate it, get asked for feedback, proposals. They did it very transparently, in full view of everyone, etc. Like, but the real reality is that if you don't understand the art of gaining consensus from a community of kind of free thinkers, and you think about it, Bitcoin is a very free thinking community. And it's
maybe the most difficult community to get consensus from.
Right. So how do you do that? How do you get consensus from 95% of a community on anything, really, unless it's really there's? And so the approach. So I think we can all agree that the approach that was taken didn't work because we're not there, right? And guess what? The miners are part of that community, and they're feeling disenfranchised to some extent. So what we're seeing today is a function, like to an extent, the beast that exists right now with the mining community is something which has been created by the call it Bitcoin, the community. We've taken this community to a point right now where we've got a large dissident base, and we have not unified ourselves. Why? Okay, it's not always just about the money. Okay, people just often want to be heard, and they want to feel that their voice matters. And so when you see the Segwit adoption percentage you see today, it's very clear that it's not, And look, you can argue it's one man controlling all the mining pools, etc. And there's arguments for that potentially, and you've read them. And I don't think that anyone would disagree that there may be some degree of it. But again, anyone I speak to agrees that the way the consensus was built was kind of not in line with the way the consensus is expected to be achieved, right? So otherwise you would have 95%. So then it was miscalculated. And so how do we solve that? How do we get to the point where we can get broad consensus from the community? How do we get to the point where everyone feels that I mean, I think everyone without a doubt does not doubt that Core is the most competent team on the planet when it comes to Bitcoin. Okay, there's no doubt in anyone's mind. And I am a huge supporter of Segwit, what's in there, and the fact that we should activate it. And I've been saying it the whole time, and I'm saying we have to go to hard fork with Segwit, but we're at this juncture for a different reason than that. And I think we just need to figure out why and prevent it from happening again. But the most important thing we need to do right now is like lay down our guns and our swords and our weapons and figure out how to come together, because escalating the problem is not the solution. Staying together is the solution, and we can deal with some of the other problems later on. But right now, a hard fork is death to Bitcoin in my mind.
It would be unfortunate. I don't know if it's going to go all the way to death, but it would be
a
splintering and a fracturing.
Let me explain that. When I say death to Bitcoin in my mind, my view of Bitcoin is the way it kind of is today. We have a bit of the good and the bad. We all go together on the journey. The moment we have two Bitcoins, for me, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of two Bitcoins because, quite frankly, both coins will probably survive in a hard fork. Who knows which will be valued more or less? But it's fractured, and it's going to be confusing to the consumers. And the media is going to jump on it. The banks who hate Bitcoin and jump on it. Like, you're basically just opening up to attack from everyone who's told us for the past 9 years, we're going to fail. We're for druggies, rapists, murderers, the dark underbelly of the web, Bitcoin. Like, every single bad thing you've heard about Bitcoin and why we're going to fail. Everyone I told that I said Bitcoin will succeed, Bitcoin is the chosen one type of thing, I'll be wrong. If we split, I'll be wrong. I'll be honest, because I think, and especially since we know how much good is in Bitcoin. In fact, we all know how the bad stuff in Bitcoin is all moving to the dark coins because it's way more anonymous and that's great. So that can go all to the bad coins. And I kind of give Zuko crap about this on Twitter, but like, it's fine. Like, Bitcoin, I think, is in a really good place in the eyes of the people of the world, in the media. It's in a really solid place. We're poised for a $3,000 Bitcoin this year if we can get past this particular juncture. It's a very defining moment for Bitcoin, and we can choose to walk away and split, or we can choose to come together and walk that path together. And I guarantee you, if we split, there's no way that the combined coin will be worth, even where it is today.
All right, let's continue down this path of empathy, and let's understand how bad it must have gotten for Roger and the other Bitcoin Unlimited team to believe what they believe. Because Roger talked about this Monday on the show. He believes there'll be a split. He believes his side will win. His side will become the new Bitcoin. They'll have the most hash power. They'll have Bitcoin.com. And eventually he believes, I think his theory is that BU takes off and Core has problems getting even miners and fades away. Is that going to happen? Is that a believable future that Bitcoin Unlimited ascends and we just all get on board on that project?
It needs to be believable by Roger. Because Roger is a man of conviction, make no mistake. And in order to do what he's doing right now and forcing a decision within the Bitcoin ecosystem, for better or for worse, and whether we decide to split, and prove him right, that's irrelevant. He has conviction that this is going to happen and this is the way it is. He's frustrated, and he does believe it. Now, whether that makes it true or not is a separate question. Frustrated, but I have a different way of expressing it. My way was, I'm selling my coin, 90% of my coins in protest. Obviously people think that I'm doing it for other reasons. I said, if I buy back the coins, even if I buy back more coins at that price, at a lower price, I will donate the profits or the difference to charity. So I am not in this for the money. It's irrelevant to me. I want Bitcoin to be successful, but my way of fixing the problem is I'm saying I think the market needs to fix the problem, because we cannot have a split in the community, because people don't understand that the combined value of the coins will guaranteed be less, guaranteed, than what it is today as one unified coin. So it's a Metcalfe's law. Bitcoin right now has the network effects. Sure, Roger can go build it up. He can work with processors to go onboard merchants. Some of the big name merchants aren't going to come on board, some will, but you have a fractured community. You're going to fracture it. So Roger does believe it. He does, and he may actually get it done. And the thing is this is the point. Just, it's like the Incredible Hulk. We all love the Hulk. He gets angry, he gets bigger, he breaks things, no one wins, okay? So, Bitcoin can survive, but we don't really want anything to get angry. We don't want Bitcoin to get angry. We don't want like anger. It doesn't get us anywhere. And so I appeal to, look, again, you got to understand where people are coming from here. It's frustration. It's human emotion. Okay, this is again. I don't know Roger very well. I've met him a couple of times, and the one thing I can say, he does love Bitcoin, but he just doesn't see the Bitcoin today as being the Bitcoin that he bought into, and that is true to a large extent. He doesn't see that. I think he lacks a bit of patience, because I think we'll get there. Lack of patience, and again, it's the frustration which leads to his lack of patience. And so, because he's frustrated, he's looking for another alternative to get there faster. He is looking at the innovation in altcoins and the growth there and the returns there. And I believe he's missing a part of the picture of the long-term story for Bitcoin. I think everyone in Bitcoin is too impatient and too, we want, let's moon next week. Let's get to $5,000 next month because of the ETF. Calm down. Technology takes years to develop, build, mature. And also, I mean, remember, the perspective that Core has is actually a very good perspective. It's like a safety-first perspective. Before we make radical changes to the system, before we, they do like 6 months of testing on every bit that comes out, just about. Like, they're very, very cautious, and for good reason. Because if they broke something, we would all be just pissed, right? So the two sides. But the point is, Roger gets, I think, a little bit frustrated with the pace that things develop in the Bitcoin world and with Core and whatever else. And I'm not saying he's entirely wrong, but Core's taking a very sort of safe route, and they have to, and they have had to, up to now, they've had to take the sort of the safer path for all our benefits. At some point, it comes to a head, and you say, okay, well, sometimes you look at the outcomes, and you say, well, on a probabilistic basis, are we better off doing this and that, and taking a little bit more risk here in order to achieve the same end goal? So I think it's just about, again, understanding the emotions of everyone else, getting everyone to just calm. I don't want to, but BTFD, buy the effing dip. How about calm the F down, as the new one, as the new acronym. But here's the problem, right? When I say calm down, everyone has to stand off. Everyone has to take a step back. The miners have to say, fine, let's stop signaling BU. Maybe people stop signaling Segwit. And everyone just step back and say, how do we resolve this? How do we get everybody what we want? Because clashing right now is putting us down it's very clear we're going to go down the wrong path if we wind up in a hard fork.
It sounds a lot like we're in a 80s nuclear war Russia movie, and we all need to bring the missiles back, and we need to go down to DEFCON 4, and we need to slow things down on both sides. And I think that's going to be difficult because, like you're saying, Roger is the Incredible Hulk. He doesn't have any patience. He can't get angry. And on the other side, I don't want to just stereotype coders and developers, but they're not very emotional. They're much less emotional. They want to test things. They don't mind if it takes years and years. These are our tedious details guys. They're not like the Hulk. They're very different groups. And we have to cool down the Hulk, maybe get some emotions to our non-emotional guys and bring them together. So how are we going to do that? We're going to need a Gandhi type force. We're going to need to bring the salt from the sea. What can we do?
I think what we can do is, I think there are some options that are being considered right now, which I think are pacifist options to a large extent, and I think that they could work. And I've had some of my own ideas out there, and with a few select people. But I can tell you now, it's the same way that you solve the Bay of Pigs issue and a couple other. It's always back channels, right? You don't solve this in the front lines. This is diplomacy. This is not me writing a blog post right now and saying, this is how we solve it, people. Everyone come together. That's not going to work. It's going to inflame the situation more. Like the meeting next month or whatever it is in May, that's not going to solve the problem either. This is not how these things are resolved. And when I say back channels, I mean use their creativity to come up with proposals and then present that to the community. And right now, a number of groups coming up with ideas, good ideas, trying to figure out how do we get everyone to take a step back and calm down, take 2 steps forward. instead of just running straight into a wall, which we're doing right now.
I'm impatient too. I want a panacea. I want a solution to all these problems, but I know there's not one.
There isn't. Getting inflamed is not the solution. And I think patience is probably the solution right now. If we can just be a little patient, but remember, we still need to be aware of the fact that if one side takes a hostile view, the other side has to respond. Okay, so it works both ways. If core becomes hostile in any way to the miners, it's going to cause them to react negatively. And this is a typical stand-up. This is, this is Bay of Pigs, right? This is, and many others. This is a wartime scenario. Everyone needs to just take a step back and breathe, and let's not make any more hostile moves. I think there's been, there's a lot of FUD, a lot of, people said I was spreading FUD when I said a hard fork's impending. No, guys, that's not the FUD. The FUD is why the hard fork is impending, right? That's what.
Well, we got the 30% news. We got all the exchanges getting ready to add it as an altcoin, and then we had the market drop. So we've had some pretty strong points that there's a strong hard fork out there.
Yeah, exactly. So look, my view on this is I think that the world is best served with Bitcoin as a highly, immutable and consistent digital commodity that doesn't get changed much, if ever. Okay, and we maintain that, and we build everything around level 2, and we figure out how to scale this thing. And I think the world is best served, which means that digital currency, it takes a little bit longer to get there, and it can serve both the needs of both parties. But we can't have a situation where the velocity of spend as digital currency exceeds the network throughput, and we have scaling issues. Lou Claassen, I tweeted about this today. He wrote a really good blog post about what sort of capacity we need in Bitcoin to scale to the card networks, etc. Guys, we can get to the point within Bitcoin where we can scale almost infinitely to handle every transaction on the planet eventually. But it's not going to happen next year. It's not going to happen the year after. It's going to take us a decade, maybe 6 or 7 years, or 5 or 7 years, who knows? And so the point about being patient is this: if we align our interests, and our interest is that Bitcoin itself is successful, and it achieves the goals that we want it to achieve in terms of freedom, liberty, separation of currency from value creation. These are things, the ideals which I'm passionate about. I mean, I think we can give it a couple of years. We can be a bit more patient. We need to solve certain issues as they arise, and solve in a way which is fair and balanced, and where consensus is driven from a bottom-up level in the community. But I think attacking each other puts us to the point where we have a potential split. And I'm not saying who attacked first, but the point is that if we're not in tune with the emotions of the community from the get-go on every major issue like this, we're going to wind up in this situation again. But I really truly hope that as a result of what's happened today, and when I say today, in today's world, in Bitcoin, I think we will be a lot more well equipped to deal with something like this again next time, if we can get through this. So getting through this phase right now is kind of like, we're like an adolescent phase as Bitcoin. Getting through this means we're actually going to start growing up and be a bit more mature about how we deal with conflict within Bitcoin. As a result of this, you're going to find leaders are going to emerge, voices of reason are going to emerge, people who have been critical are going to be, we shouldn't be, have raised their voices or sort of been hostile, or whatever it is, towards Bitcoin and the community. To those people, I don't think we should, if we can avoid a hard fork, the whole point is, let's forgive and forget to an extent. Like, we can't hold these, if we can resolve this hard fork, we shouldn't be like calling, Roger Bitcoin Judas going forward, especially if he's part of the solution of us solving it. If Gion comes together, if core team comes together, we need to move forward as a united front to the rest of the world. And so it doesn't help, but you can be pissed off about it. It's kind of like, but it's like a couple that kind of breaks up for a while, gets back together, you kiss and make up, okay, and really move forward. And again, if we can do that, we'll be a lot stronger. But I understand that there are heightened tensions on both sides, and they each have their reasons. And unless you really take the time to understand the individual and the regions collectively, it's not as simple as just as money. Okay, it's not always about money. If it was, it would be a different world we're living in. within
It
Bitcoin.
might be simpler if it was all about money. A friend of
Well,
mine, I said earlier, I was kind of doing a hostage negotiation here, and he said what you're actually doing is marriage counseling. And I think that's what you're getting at there, is that Roger's not something that we're trying to get rid of or something we're trying to throw away. Roger's our spouse. He's our friend.
well,
We've
he's the
had a
kid.
long
He's the
relationship.
kid.
We need him back. You
No,
know,
Roger's the kid.
Okay.
He's the kid. He's the kid who's like, you know, to the
He's
extent, like,
impatient. He's in a hurry. He needs things now.
He's
Yeah?
flaming,
Okay.
flaming the situation. He's causing his parents to divorce.
Right. And we've got to keep those parents together, the coders and the miners, who are the parents of Roger.
Yeah.
And they're fighting over money, probably. I mean,
Again, it's not just about the money. I think if everyone took a step back and the miners realized, and it was just about the money, and the miners, and I'm sure they know this already, they can make a lot more money with Segwit going forward, right? And there are some other concerns they've got, but let's deal with those concerns. If it was just about the money, it would be probably a lot easier to resolve. But I don't think it's just about the money. I think look, they're valid concerns, and I think it's important that we just take a view that in order to move forward, we have to build consensus. However we do it, we have to build consensus. And so, there are situations where consensus is not possible. I just don't believe we're there yet. I don't believe anybody in their right mind that you can posture all you want on both sides, or all five sides, whichever sides are on display. You can do as much posturing and blustering. I don't think anyone truly believes that we're better off split than we are together. And if they do, it's because they've given up, and not because they truly believe it.
this reminds me of the Constitutional Congress when George Washington and Ben Franklin were talking. They're saying, well, we could all hang together or we could all hang separately. And they decided to hang together. And exactly. I think that was the right decision. And we need to look back on that. We could say, well, the country could have split up right there over the issue of slavery. It could have split up right there over a myriad of other issues, having a permanent standing army. A lot of these things were life and death, incredibly violent debates that they had. And at the end of the day, they came together and they all signed the Constitution. They all rebelled against England. And I think in that same way, we're forgetting about the larger enemy here. Bitcoin is against the banks and the currency, and it's a new form of money, and it's exciting. And we've lost that. Roger and some of these other people, these small issues, not being able to get enough transactions, the speed of change, they've lost touch with the larger fight. And I think we need to get everybody back on board with the larger fight. And like you're saying, we're better off together. We need Roger. We need the Bitcoin Unlimited guys. We need Jihan. We need Bitmain. We can't do it without them.
Exactly.
That's they can't do it without us. So we need
that's exactly my point. If we're able to move past this point, it's because Jihan, Roger, Core, everyone came together. So afterwards, you can't point a finger at them and say, you threatened Bitcoin. If anything, thank them for forcing us to the point where we actually have to build consensus and move forward. So that's the key thing here. Okay, if Bitcoin stays together, if we can keep Bitcoin together as a community, we should all be thanking everyone for the role they played, whether it was as a protagonist or an antagonist, to get us here. If it splits, all bets are off. I'm going to go hide away in an island somewhere, do what you want.
Compromise is the ultimate strength. Compromise is not a weakness here. We're not going to look back to try to punish people because you were wrong. We want to look back and say, you taught us. You taught us by exposing different views. You taught us by having your opinion. Roger wanted things to be faster, and maybe he taught us that things should be a little bit faster. The core team wants to go slow, make sure we get everything correct. That's also a valid view. We need to move forward with both of these. I'm really excited about this direction.
It's like the I think, I can't remember who said this, but someone said that Steve Jobs was a wartime CEO and Tim Cook is a peacetime CEO, right? And that's what you put that in perspective. Sometimes you need to have an approach, a hostile approach, and sometimes you need to have a peaceful approach. And as a company and as an organization, so as a community, I think this is really good that everyone is riled up and angry and upset and trying to figure this out. And that's good. That doesn't mean we should split. It means we should be even more focused on making this work.
And we need to get everyone really excited about peace. What can you do for peace? What can you do to draw this back?
I don't think we
you.
should tone down the conversations as a community. We need to have them. We need to have, we need to have these conversations. It's not about compromising. Okay, compromising is this is not about compromise. Means that someone wins and someone loses, someone gives a bit more, this is not a compromise situation. This is about what is the best solution for Bitcoin as a community to move forward. Okay, and if everyone's taking positions and it feels that they've got to move their position in order to, if Gian has to give in order for us to win as a community, or if Core has to give in order for us to win, or it's a stand between the two of them, we're not going to get anywhere, because then we're basically playing to people's emotions and egos. And I think if we all want what's best for Bitcoin, we'll figure out what is that path forward, and is there a solution to get the consensus we need as a community to move forward. And if we really feel that we're fractured to the point that nobody is on the same page, and everyone wants if we believe that Bitcoin is one of those things where it needs to be all things to all people, and everyone agrees that it needs to be all things to all people right now, and no one's willing to budge on that principle, then I agree that Bitcoin's free, because it cannot be, there's no product in the world, especially in the tech world, that can be all things to all people. That's why you have different companies doing different things. That's why you have an economy, you have specialists. It's just against the nature of what we do. So I understand the use cases, our development cycle, from my experiences. I think we need to focus on one use case at a time and build it out, and be patient with the others. And so if there's this lack of patience, we're going to have a split. It's as simple as that. But if there's a willingness to say, fine, what's the roadmap? What's the pathway forward? How do we achieve our goals in a unifying way? Core's right. I'm not saying Gian and Roger's right. I'm saying that together there is a path forward. I believe there's a path forward. But it's just really hard to have conversations with the heat is where it is. And so I just want everyone watching, thinking about this, to just realize that it's okay to have the conversations. It's okay to bring up the issues. But remember, as one side inflames the other, it becomes harder to actually resolve this peacefully.
And I know how hard it can be for people when you're caught up in this crypto time. Things seem to move so fast. 6 months ago, there's a totally different slate of companies. The prices doubled, things like that. It just happens so quickly. But what we need to do is pause and take a breath for a moment. I saw a congressman on TV talking recently, and he was talking about impeachment and issues like this. And what he said is, we need people to think beyond themselves, to beyond their short-term gains. We need people to think, what will your grandchildren say when they look back and they said, what did you do at this time? And this is part of why I took action this week. I'm not a big deal. I'm not a coder. I'm not super famous or anything. But what I felt was, we're about to go over Niagara Falls. We're going to go over a cliff.
That's exactly right.
And afterwards, things are going to be totally different. We're never going to get back up that cliff. I'm not talking price. I'm not talking technology. It's just in general. There's a cliff. And I said, well, we're going to go over it. And either we're going to talk about it and we're going to fully understand, and everyone's going to turn the keys together, and we're all going to say, let's do it. Let's blow up the thing. Or maybe we can slow it down. Maybe we can step it back. And that's our goal now, is that we don't have to go over this cliff, and we don't have to do this, and we can work together and find a solution. So I think the basic step forward, everyone needs to start to try to understand the other side. You have to think, what does this Bitcoin Unlimited supporter have in common with me? We both like Bitcoin. What do they want that I don't want? How can I understand them, and how can I forgive them and move forward? And the same thing for core supporters. What do they want that BU supporters don't want? How can I understand them? It's not about one side. I'm talking both sides here.
That's exactly right. And I think this is a very, again, it's not about, this is a positive sum game. Like, we have to win as a group, because the alternative is just not, in my mind. I mean, look, a split is so bad that I don't want to predict how bad it's going to be. And I know people disagree with me, and I'm hoping I never have to be proved right or wrong afterwards. I just hope we're going to get to that point. The thing is this: a lot of people out there understand one small side of the entire issue, and I'm not even saying I understand the entire issue. I'm saying I think I've got a much deeper view of it, because where I'm situated and where and how I've sort of embedded myself in understanding the problem. But if you don't spend enough time just talking to people, understanding it, and being at the conferences and knowing the actual people behind it, it's just, they become a name. I mean, I guarantee you, like, most of the people out there who will sort of write about it or post comments haven't met the people they're writing about. They don't know the people. They just write the stories. And this is the concern. So how do we get past that? Yeah. So I think what I'm saying is, let's be vigilant, but let's try and just be a bit more measured and peaceful.
All right, let's be the change that we want to see in the world.
Exactly. And I think this is Gandhi said that, actually.
There it is. Absolutely. We're going back to Gandhi. And this has been a really positive show. And I'm excited for this new direction. And I hope that everyone at home, I'm going to go back and read the chat room. And I know it was very contentious earlier. And I'm hoping that it's a little more Mr. Rogers-like at the end, where we're thinking about our neighbor and we're thinking about our neighborhood and what we can do to make this neighborhood better. And maybe it's picking up trash. Maybe it's putting out positive comments or trying to get people to come together. But we all need to take steps as part of this. And we're all a part of this. We can all have some measure of small change leading towards the total change of, hopefully, like Vinny said, coming together, not hard forking, and coming together for a solution. So let's do this as a team, Bitcoin.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
Any questions or?
Well, the chat's been scrolling right by. Let's see.
Let me have a look. Let's see.
The guy says, Roger.
I think I saw the same thing you just saw.
Roger is Bitcoin Jesus. Vinny is Bitcoin Gandhi. There it is right there. You got a new nickname. We'll get the Photoshop guy. We got some graphics on that. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to bring back a little Gandhi action here. I'm a fan of that. Like you said,
Matt Bell. Nice one, Matt. Thank you.
Excellent stuff. So, yeah, we got Bitcoin Gandhi right here, and we're going to try to solve these problems. People are going back and forth.
Actually, I think you probably should address that. I think Ether is fine. I think there's definitely use cases for it. My biggest issue with Ether is the inflation rate is something which I just can't get my head around. You know, and I know that the goal is to go into proof of stake at some point. What it is, there's a lot of issues around Ether as a store of value, which I haven't got my head around yet. And I don't have an issue with it. I mean, you know, I think there's a lot of great use cases. I can see using it and see companies using it, and I can see the demand for it growing all the time. It's just not the same thing as Bitcoin is, which is digital gold. I did see a question where I think Rhett Creighton asked me why I'm so into Bitcoin if I'm selling 90%. So I sold 90% and I have reasons for it. You should read my article, and if you can post it to the guys, it would be great. Basically, it's for the love of Bitcoin. I did this because I love Bitcoin, guys. I don't do it for the money. It's not that important to me. Like, the amount of money I had in Bitcoin was a single-digit percentage of my net worth. It's just not that meaningful money-wise, but I don't do things in life for money. That's not why I do the things I do. If you look at my life as an entrepreneur, I do things I just think are cool and I enjoy it. So I think people fixate on the value creation, the money side of Bitcoin versus, like, as someone who grew up in Africa and watched how Zimbabwe collapsed and how currency devaluation happened. This is a big issue in the world, and it's affecting people in Venezuela and all of, like, we can be part of a small group of people who actually make meaningful changes in the world for the rest of, you know, hopefully the rest of mankind's existence on the planet, which may not be long, but who knows. But I think it's about getting meaning out of what we're doing right now. And so, yeah, I took a position where I just didn't feel that the amount of Bitcoins I was holding was, at 1250, given the issues I was seeing, was a good position to be in. And I've said that if I buy them back at a lower price, and more once the scaling base resolved, my thesis for buying Bitcoin last good time to buy, it was like 465 and getting into that price, was really about the fact that scaling had been resolved. And now that scaling is not resolved, I'm more bearish on Bitcoin until it's resolved. And so the market can determine what the price. I'm an investor primarily. I have a portfolio, I have assets, and I allocate my assets based upon my personal, and everyone's different. So some people want to have 95% of wealth in Bitcoin. Good for them. I don't. I love Bitcoin, but I think that you have to have a sensible approach to your investment strategy, especially if you have kids or dependents or business. Like everyone's different, right? So I don't think it's fair to put the same. Like if I was 18 years old, sure, I'd have all my net worth into Bitcoin, but that might be $20,000. Who cares, right? It's different when the numbers change. It's different.
All right, we have a question from Beauty Bubble who asks, can we quantify the risk should this all not work out?
I actually did a model. I actually did a spreadsheet model on that, and I have to pull it up. But yeah, so you can model the risk. It's all rough guesses and percentages. The bottom line is the worst case scenario of a hard fork. I saw the combined price dropping to 400 to 500 range combined. And that's because of lots of issues. But I actually built a model around it. So I think the risk is high enough that is a reality on the low side. It could be even worse if the market, the media FUD, etc. It could make it even worse. Who knows? But I'd say right now the chance of a hard fork is probably, I would say 25% of a contentious hard fork. I'd say, probably 50% that we maintain the status quo for 6 to 9 more months at least, and then 25% chance of a resolution.
All right. Donald asks, are the miners afraid of losing fees?
I believe it's not about them being afraid of it. It's about if it happens and it gets to a point that that their businesses are losing so much money that they have to make a decision, then may have a decision happening sooner, right? So, but then, so all I'm saying is, the price of Bitcoin doesn't reflect the risks right now of a hard fork, and maybe it does. Depends on what you expect the upside to be. But the point is, that's one way of getting a decision, is because if a high price perpetuates the status quo, we're going to be stuck trying to solve scaling 6 more months, 9 more months. Bitcoin will be where it is today in 6 months' time or 9 months' time. So that's my point. And a lower price discounts that fact and says, okay, well, there's issues in Bitcoin as a free market economy. How does that adjust, and how does it effectively create the disincentive to keep having the conversation for longer? Because, like, let's agree, if Bitcoin was $200 a day, we'd have every miner, every developer, everyone in one room trying to figure out how the hell to solve this problem, because everyone's losing money, right? At the current level, no one's losing money.
The last time we went through that, I shut my own miners off, and I don't think I've turned them back on since. So that was the end of that.
Exactly. So it forces a decision, especially when you have millions of dollars invested. Now, do I want Bitcoin to come crashing down? No, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. The issue to be resolved. But in the absence of people coming together as a community and figuring it out, I said the price should drop, and I think that also scared people. I think when I published my post saying the invisible hand's going to come in, price, there was a lot of fear that this is going to happen. And what that did was it actually forced people to think out the box and say, how do we not have this happen? How does something which we previously thought was a very small percentage chance is now being raised as something which, like, I had a conversation with Tone Vase. He was convinced that a hard fork was not going to happen. 0% chance, Vinny. 10 minutes or half an hour of the discussion, he actually came back and wrote a blog post about it on his blog. He's actually convinced now that hard fork is likely to or it's more likely to happen than he thought before having the conversation with me. So that's all my intention is. Intention is to educate people the fact that risks that are discounted down to zero are in fact not zero. They are not zero risks. They are a lot higher than zero. I say 25% right now. That is a scary prospect. 25% is a big number in terms of percentages. It's a 1 in 4 chance. It's like, I've played roulette before, and I've caught numbers at 135 to 1 chances, and that that happens at a reasonable rate. When you play roulette at 35 to 1, 4 to 1. It's not exactly so. I put money on the Patriots game at halftime, 5 to 1 on Brady. Paid off.
It's very much a possibility. For this next one, I'm going to combine 2 questions. Maximiliano and 95 Mr. Doug ask, Vinny, please convince Core of 2 megabyte blocks plus Segwit so that we can make peace in the community. And kind of a companion question, how do we communicate with the miners? they're not idealistic.
Okay, so again, it's hard to communicate with the miners just because obviously it's partially language barrier, cultures, etc. So that's why I said it kind of happens through a bit of back channels and discussions and whatever else. I can't convince core of anything. No one can, and that's the whole point. People don't understand this. Core is core. It's a group of developers. They believe in consensus. So the market has to provide consensus on something. And so if they've made a mistake in figuring out what consensus is, the market should adjust to that and figure it out. So I'll leave it at that for now. But it's not as simple as that. It's just that's not a simple question to answer. I will say, I will put, I think Rhett Creighton asked the question, why was Vinny's ETF predictions wrong? My prediction was absolutely right on the ETF, that it would be declined. If it was approved, I said around about 1750 would be a max price and 850 would be on the low end. The price hit 960. Okay, the one thing I didn't factor in was there was actually a lot of money sitting on exchanges that snapped up the coins as they were falling, because these were the guys who were about to buy it on the upside, and when they saw the coins being cheaper, they actually took the downside as well. But like being off by $100 on a fall from 1350 down to 950, 960 versus 850. Like my point was that 850 was the floor. I mean, I think people misinterpreted that. I didn't say it's going to be. I said on the downside 850, and I don't feel like having those discussions and debates and Twitter back and forth. Besides, the price doesn't matter, guys. Like everyone asks me about price. I can give you a price estimates based upon data that I get from my broker, data that I get from multiple sources which I subscribe and pay for information on Bitcoins. I look at volume charts, so I have a good estimation of where things are going based on the supply and demand curve. I mean, I guarantee you, most of the people who kind of criticize my what I say haven't looked at first of all track record. I think there's a spreadsheet that's been compiled like 90-something% accuracy, and secondly, they understand the fundamentals of what drives the price up. And like, if people understood one thing, understand that today miners need $2 million a day, $60 million a month to sustain their operations. And if you have a 25% margin, call a profit margin, that let's say they retain 20% of that, $1.6 million plus a day they need. So that's how much demand the Bitcoin world has to generate, fiat really, to make it worth to keep the price rising. So if that demand comes down, and you couldn't generate $60 million worth of fiat per month in Bitcoin, it's going to impact the price. And that's just miners. Let's forget the rest of the ecosystem. How much the Bitcoin world needs probably about $100 million a month in fiat coming into the system. Now, we've been very fortunate that number, it's been over $100 million for the past couple of months. That's what pushed the price up, and the halving obviously changed those economics a bit as well. But that's the fiat requirements. And if we understand that part, we can start building an argument across where the price is going to go based on supply and demand curves, and so it's reasonably easy to sort of. I'm not an oracle. I don't have a crystal ball or shit like that. I actually just use data.
And once again, to extend the argument, what if we split into two camps? If we had two separate groups of forces, would we still need the 100 million a month just in two 50 million piles? Would it be even harder to get it when we're trying to say there's Bitcoin 1 and there's Bitcoin 2?
Yes.
Can you imagine?
Now the argument from people on the core side and BTC side who want to stay with that coin is a good argument. It's like, well, the money will come here. Yes, to an extent. Here's the problem. People who are new money coming into the system goes and says, I want to buy some Bitcoin. Which one? Unlimited or regular? I don't know. Should I split them up? Actually, I'm not sure yet. Let me come back to you. There you go. So this is the problem, okay? As a unified front, more fiat comes into the system. As a diverse front, well, maybe I should buy some Bitcoin and some BTU. It's a BTU and some BTC. Well, actually, should I add some Ethereum into that as well? And how about some Dash and some Monero and some this and that, and scam coin within those as well? Like, this is the problem. It's either, if Bitcoin is the store of value and the unit of accounting for the crypto world, it's always going to be about the Bitcoin price. But the moment you split Bitcoin, you're actually saying, well, if I'm going to have two, I might as well have three. If I have three, I might as well have four. It's like, this is the problem. And I can spend hours talking about these type of problems. But these are the nuances that people don't really understand.
It reminds me of the symbol of the fasces, the many arrows bound together to create strength. If you take one arrow, you can break it over your knee simply. If you take 10 arrows and bind them together, it's almost impossible to break. And again, that could be us if we work together. This is going to be us if we break up into individual pieces and they all break us off. And we can't allow this. We can't allow this.
Exactly.
We're hearing a couple more questions.
And by the way, if the BU chain does fail, okay, you know what the news is going to say? Bitcoin failed.
Bitcoin's dead. Bitcoin's dead.
Bitcoin failed. Bitcoin is dead. You know what happened the last time that happened in the media in a big way? We had a 2-year bear market for Bitcoin. So even if Bitcoin Unlimited fails, we fail. And people do not appreciate that.
That's a very excellent point. It's really true. We have a couple more questions. They're saying, what about the meeting in New York? Are you going to be attending? I know you said earlier you don't hope for likely for.
I haven't been invited. I haven't been invited, and I probably wouldn't attend because again, I don't believe that you can represent the interests of the entire community with a couple of guys in a room. I don't think that the solution gets driven by that sort of discourse.
I also think you're correct. The solution is not going to come in public in a fancy, shiny conference. It's going to come from back channels. People who know people talking to people and asking them to be reasonable and to compromise and to think about the horror of two
I don't want to use the word compromise. The word compromise is a bad word. I really believe it. It's not about compromising, okay? It's about understanding how do we take a unified position. Is you giving and taking on the other side. A unified position is that we both agree this is the right way forward together given the needs of the community. So I'm asking for unification, not compromise.
All right, unification, much better word. Looking for some more questions. If the Reddit community had not become so divided and all the censorship taken place, would we be in a better position?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the part of the whole Reddit community is, look, one of the things that Civic's doing right now, my company is doing, is we're building technology that allows people to verify the identities and actually prevent Sybil accounts. Sybil accounts are a problem because one little teenager in a room who's like 15 years old can create 20 different Reddit accounts and make it look like, you can make a shitstorm out of nothing. And so we got to get past the point where the internet is willing to accept fake accounts or you know, and there's a difference between, you know, privacy and anonymity, okay? Privacy is like no one knows who you are, except the people who you know, and you can verify your information. Anonymity basically is like you can have 20 accounts, you don't know it's the same person. And so how do we get to that point? And that's why I'm passionate about solving that problem in my company, because if we can solve that problem, we can actually have the right dialogue with the right people. They don't have to give their identities away, but we need to know that they're a real person and they're not creating multiple accounts and having multiple, you know, they don't amplifying their own voices with sort of, you know, illusory accounts and so it's really hard on Reddit. It's really hard on Reddit to be able to tell whether it's one person or 20 people commenting on a certain thread. And you know how many of these kids have so much time on their hands, they can go, they'll do it easily, no problem. Not just kids, 55-year-old guys as well, you know, 45-year-old guys, and guys like me who just like nothing better to do. I'm 38 years old, so I can imagine a 38-year-old guy on a weekend saying, "Fuck it, let me go screw with Reddit." You know, go create 20 accounts, and there you go.
And a lot of times they're just trolling for fun, to have something to do. Yeah. They're not realizing that they may be causing splits in a huge community and maybe irreconcilable, a complete disaster.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing people don't understand is and when it comes to altcoins, why I'm kind of negative about altcoins to a large extent, is altcoins do not have the liquidity pool that Bitcoin's got. And so that means that it trades at the margin. So imagine I went in right now to Bitcoin and I took $1 million and tried to buy $1 million of coins for open market. You know, that's like what, 1,000 coins? It's not going to budget much. But 1,000 coins into something else, if I go buy $1 million worth of any other coin, I'm going to get the price up 50%. I'm going to pump that thing. And that's the problem. You see, the problem with altcoins is with the lack of liquidity. You can so Ether is probably the only altcoin that can withstand that sort of volume right now, right? And maybe and so that's fine. But the next question, the issue I have with Ether is the rate of inflation has not been accurately determined yet. So I have a problem with that being a store of value, because in the same way that governments can just print money, you know, and so when people look at Ether's volumes, I think I'm not going to address him more than this once, but you look at Ether's volumes. Here's the issue: Ether is BTC to Ether volumes are really high. Okay, what's the fiat to ETC volume? That's the question. I don't know the answer. I don't spend time looking at Ether. And I said Ether is probably the only cryptocurrency that can compete with Bitcoin in terms of liquidity right now. But the one thing that happened with Bitcoin early on was you could spend Bitcoins everywhere. 50,000 merchants through Gyft. There was so much liquidity in terms of their money into fiat, Bitcoin into fiat the whole time, because these merchants would take fiat, right, the whole time. And therefore it created a base level of liquidity in terms of like off-ramps. And there aren't really off-ramps for Ether right now except into Bitcoin. Like I don't see any single website that I've been to that accepts Ether as a payment method. Like they don't. It's not a payment method. So it's not. So this is the issue. And I think people don't appreciate what liquidity does to the price and how easy it is to mess with it and manipulate prices. And so again, I'm a bit more of a conservative, old timer when it comes to investing, and I look at these things a lot more differently than other people. Listen, I'm not saying it's a bad investment, but there is something between speculative grade and investment grade, right? Bitcoin is moving more towards an investment grade asset, and everything else is kind of still speculative, right? Again, you can make money speculating, but then most people who trade don't understand what the word alpha means, okay, and risk-adjusted returns, and I do. And that makes me a little bit more conservative. It means I might miss some opportunities, but I'm also not going to get my money trapped in some hole very easily.
I agree. I've seen the same thing with altcoins. There's such a difference both in the markets and technologically between Bitcoin and the nearest competitor, be it Litecoin, Dash, Monero, Ethereum. They're just much more spread out than that. Bitcoin's been tested over multiple years, had incredible attacks, large-scale attacks, and if any of these other coins rose to that level, they're going to see the same kind of attacks, the same kind of scrutiny of their code, and we have to wonder what's going to happen to them. It might not be pretty.
Absolutely. So the one answer I give people when it comes to altcoins, what do you think? Until proven innocent, right? So if it can withstand the test of time, then I'm all for it. But unless there are off-ramps for these coins, the biggest mistake we make is if you find a coin that is accepted widely at 50,000, 100,000 merchants, if Gyft, I'm not even in Gyft anymore. Excuse me. So I sold the company 2 years ago. If Gyft, I don't talk to the guys there, so I don't know. I'm just saying, if Gyft adopted an altcoin, I would buy that altcoin once the price settled, because that's a very healthy off-ramp. All these merchants, gift cards, etc. I see the volumes. I mean, when we ran Bitcoin on Gyft with BitPay, we were the biggest merchant for BitPay. So we were creating the off-ramp into fiat, and we could see the impact on price on certain days when we had a promotion or Black Friday. We could see the impact. We were like 5% of the blockchain's transactions on those days. The volumes were mega volumes. So we could see how when the price rose, people would use their coins to purchase, how it would impact the price on etc. So without off-ramps, it's like basically buying property on an island. It's always going to go up, right? Because there's nowhere else to buy, and people don't leave the island. And that's why you have Australia in a bit of a property bubble, and you have island property keeps going up because people have nowhere else to move. There's no extra land, right? So, but at some point, at some point the bubble bursts. And I'm just not a big fan of musical chairs. So I've taken a conservative view on altcoins, and I will buy into altcoins if and when I believe that there's sufficient liquidity in terms of off ramps, not just on ramps or into other altcoins. And I think someone asked the question of what altcoin am I thinking to. So I'm actually investing in an IPFS. It's not an altcoin. It's it's a more protocol, and they're launching coin for a while and that sort of thing. So I would be because the use case for that is very different. That's about distributed storage, right? So I think that the altcoins where currency is it's either currency or maybe making it a darker coin or whatever it is. If that's the use case for the coin, I kind of stay out of it. In tokens, so I've done spells of Genesis. I invested in Augmentors, which is an ICO as well, but those are gaming tokens, very different use cases. So I tend to believe right now that Bitcoin is the one as a global currency, as a globally accepted store of value. So if that's the use case that an altcoin is competing with, I'm not that interested in it until Bitcoin proves otherwise to be, if we fork, whatever, then I'll start looking at other altcoins. If Bitcoin stays together, I'm going to be full on Bitcoin. But when I look at other altcoins, and there's things like Golem, which I've looked at, which looks interesting as well. Those are the types of things I think interesting. Like, what are the different ways we can use these altcoins to perform different tasks in society, to act as a way of transmitting value, or like what are the things which are different about them, where it's not competing as a payment method? Because quite frankly, people don't understand this. Okay, you are not going to go to a Walmart or a Target or Starbucks and get them to. They won't even put Bitcoin on there right now. They're not going to be putting on Dash or Monero or Dogecoin or whatever coin. It's not going to happen, guys. Like, Bitcoin can't even get there right now. So those merchants and those off-ramps are kind of locked out. So in my mind, the market right now, to a large extent, you'll get smaller merchants adopting these innovative new coins. That's not where the volume is. It's not going to create the sufficient liquidity off-ramps to make it worth getting into the crypto. But if you look at something like a Filecoin or maybe a Golem or one of the other ones out there that do specialty unique tasks which are not related to it being a currency as its purpose, then I think those are. I'm not saying you should just buy them. I'm not endorsing any. I didn't invest in IPFS, but like, I'm not endorsing Golem or any of these others. People make their own decisions. But the point is that it's different. It's not currency. I don't like those where I think Bitcoin has an edge and a network effect to compete with.
And that's one of the differentiators for me, is that I don't like the term coin for these other projects. I like the term token. For me,
exactly.
Coin has an economic structure. It has inflation, deflation. I like a fixed number of units. When I think about coin, I like Bitcoin because of the economic choices. When I think about tokens, you're saying gaming tokens, things that do something like Steam voting tokens. There can be a lot of them. I don't care. That's fine. So I'm more interested when they call it a token. That's just a semantic difference, but yeah, it works better for me that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so I also look at the trading pairs between altcoins and Bitcoin, and those are what dominate right now. So you'll notice when the Bitcoin price is coming down quickly, people want to get out. They don't want to cash into fiat. They go into Ether or something else, and then that one pumps. And if there's a lot of volatility in Bitcoin, then the altcoins go up. And conversely, right? So if an altcoin is crashing, people go and buy Bitcoin because it looks cheap relative to what's happening. So eventually, people realize that at the end of the day, these altcoins still need fiat to pay the developers to, it needs to be off-ramps. And so if somebody wants to convince me that something is not a pump and dump scheme or an altcoin, show me the data. Show me how much money is coming into this altcoin. What are the exchanges being purchased in fiat, and the off-ramps, which merchants are accepting them? Are they holding your crypto afterwards because you convince them that they should because it keeps it up in price, or they're cashing into fiat, and how does the mechanism work? Okay, and that's important. This is where BitPay plays a very important role in the ecosystem of Bitcoin, and this is why if there's a split and BitPay has to then go and activate an altcoin like BU, they have to make some tough decisions from a UX perspective. Like, if someone comes to the site and says, "Oh, I bought the Bitcoin Unlimited," but you don't support that, but you say, "This is like the shit we don't want to be dealing with, people." And so Bitcoin will fail, and I think that they're more likely that another cryptocurrency could be the one that actually wins. And that, by the way, is all the incentive in the world for altcoiners who didn't buy enough Bitcoin early on or don't believe in Bitcoin, whatever. It's all the incentive in the world for them to go spread FUD about Bitcoin and frame the situation more. And that's what they tend to do. I've been watching some videos on YouTube, and the guy is like, "Oh, I got this terrible email from Coinbase, and it was horrible, and and I'm so scared. But hey, you should buy Dash, or you should buy whatever it was." Like this is the point. Like it's really we are opening ourselves up in a hard fork to a lot of attacks that as a unified force we just wouldn't see otherwise.
And I think that should be a good note to end on, and return to a call for Bitcoiners, for us all to join together, that we have a chance to avoid this hard fork. We have a chance to come together, to understand the other side, to accept them, and to bring them back to us, because Bitcoiners are stronger as a team. Vinny, do you have anything to say in closing for today?
Thanks very much. Great being on the show, and take some time to read through the chat, and it looks like I'll try and respond on Twitter if anyone's been tweeting. I turn that off for a while, but it's been great. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate being on the show. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We had about 160 live viewers. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks for giving us a thumbs up and a comment, subscribing and sharing. And we're just going to keep talking about Bitcoin scaling until we hard fork, or until we come to a solution, or until we understand this entirely. So I'm just going to keep coming back and doing this. Keep suggesting to me on Twitter who I should have on next, what kind of questions I should ask. And we'll keep together working on this together, and trying to move it forward. Thanks so much, Vinny, for being on the show. And
Thanks.
until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.